Leave me alone, bro. Leave me alone, bro. I ain't messing with you, bro. You got it, bro. You got it. You got it. I'm off. We chilling.
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure you're on.
So we're here with
Brandon Brockington. Yeah.
Appreciate the tour, man. This was an awesome tour for us. And a lot of things struck out to me, man. Cornel West has this thing. He's always talking about, one should always find one's voice and avoid being an echo, right? And you told the history of black folk, a particular time that's very interesting, right? How do you find your voice in telling this history, being that you're 23 and the legacy of the school that you're at and the people who went to that school? How do you find your voice to talk about what you do in the history?
What it boils down to, well, let me start with a story. When I first started working here, it was just sporadic. I woke up one morning and I said, I want to work at the museum.
Okay.
And what I said was, I want to work at the museum and I want to incorporate poetry as well, because I do spoken word.
Okay.
So just touching on or get into the whole voice thing. And that was my voice, my poetic voice. And what was ironic, I never got around to the poetic part, but just the fact that I wanted to express it in a way that was fresh, express it in a way that was could be easily digested, and express it in a way that would engage young people. That was the main things. And it's funny because I get a lot of feedback sometimes about being a little too colloquial or sometimes too regional or too chill with it. You know what I'm saying? But that's where the voice comes in. You know what I'm saying? Because you gotta speak to young people in a way that they understand. You have to speak to them in a language that they understand. If you want them to really learn this information, if we're really about educating people, you want to make sure that you're doing that.
Right. So you definitely have that sort of anthropologist thing, right? Zora Neale Hurston went around traveling down south collecting dialects and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So again, I'm coming from up north, and the dialects is a little bit different. And you deal with people coming in from different places.
Right.
How do you find different ways to accentuate your voice, the dialects, and the history that we're looking at?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I couldn't even answer that question. I just have it really just boils down to having a way with people. Okay. You got to be able to talk to people. You can't be standoffish when it comes to people. You can't put everybody in a box. You know what I'm saying? You have to understand that every single person is different. Every black person is different. Every white person is different. Every foreigner is different. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no clear-cut stencil that you use every time. You start to understand. I start to understand people as we go throughout our tour. By the time we get to the lunch counter, I got a good grasp on who they are. You know what I'm saying? And that's based off of how they react to certain things, the questions they pose for me. All those things, you just kind of take that into account and let your spirit guide you as you're talking to people. That's really all it is. I try to explain to people, this is not a lecture. This is a discussion. This is dialogue about, you know what I'm saying, about history. This is our history. It's all about history. So.
And so if you were to close out, how would you encourage young people, one, to embrace their history, given some of the things are deeply traumatic? I mean, we saw some things that are deep. What word of advice would you have, starting with how do you deal with maybe some trauma, but finding hope and courage to stand up and tell your story with voice, dialect, and courage?
What it boils down to is finding you got to hit your sensitive point. Let me say this first. Number one, you need to young people should understand that the history isn't just about sitting in the class and being lectured about history. Here we have in 1922 and in 1963. You know what I'm saying? It's not. We gotta and that's kind of on the education Board of Education's job to kind of do that. But I want young people to understand that that's not what the history is about. The history is about beating you down with information like how they do math and science and everything else. Your history is something that's a part of you, and it's not just a matter of understanding the history, but using that history and applying it to now, and not allowing history to repeat itself. That's why you learn history, so you don't repeat it. But to go back to that sensitive point, when I was studying to work here at the museum, the first thing that happened to me emotionally was anger. I was very upset that I had gone 21 years of my life and I didn't know any of this. You know what I'm saying? I go to A&T, I didn't know who the Greensboro 4 was. You know what I'm saying? Like that really, really, really upsetted me. And I wound up being in the library every single day the entire summer, just reading all this stuff. And I hit a sensitive point. The sensitive point occurred when I was in the library and I was reading about a slave who had escaped from Virginia. And he had escaped to Boston. And he had got to Boston, and he had got a job, got a nice little spot. He was chilling. He was good.
Right.
And during this time, this is I believe the 1830s. They had the fugitive slave laws. So a slave master could come up there looking for him. You know what I'm saying? So him and a couple of henchmen came up to Boston looking for him. How they knew he was in Boston, I don't know.
Right.
But they came to Boston looking for him. They found him. They threw him in jail. They were about to take him back. And the city of Boston went up into a riot. Yeah, they went up into a riot, and they were upset that this slave master came to get the slave, and they were so upset that they were willing to pay whatever the slave was worth to the slave master. The slave master didn't want none of it, and he said he just wanted the slave. He said, I wanted to bring him back. I want my slave back. He didn't care what amount of money they offered, and they had to call in the National Guard to get this slave onto the boat and send him back to slavery. And he goes back to slavery and dies a slave.
Wow.
And by the end of this story, I'm in the library bawling, crying. and what built that up was that I always knew what slavery was, but just the fact that I had been reading and was able to fully paint in my mind what slavery was, and to see this man who had escaped, you know what I'm saying, and is brought right back, and just to see the evil intent of that man who wanted to keep him enslaved, it destroyed me. You know what I'm saying? It destroyed me. So that's very important. I feel as though our generation, if anybody in our generation isn't going to have that passion for the history until they hit that sensitive point. You got to hit that sensitive point first.
Brother, we appreciate you so much, man.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for the love.
No love.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Make sure to get your